Well, hello, hello, hello. Welcome to Poetry Live. This is Miss D coming at you. Thank you all for tuning in. I really do appreciate it. Thank you for all those subscribers. It's wonderful interacting with you. I wonder sometimes how many of you are poets. Some of you say you are. Most of you say you just love poetry or you love the arts. Well, I have questions that I want to pull up. Here we go. First of all, who am I? As you know, I'm a poet, blogger, writer, composer. I've composed music for musical theater locally here in San Diego. I've been published overseas. I'm internet published also. I performed solo, and I also performed years ago with a poetry group called Four to the Nth Power. Catherine Rice Simmons was a poet educator, one of our original members who died, and it was hard to replace her, but we found Megan Webster to replace her. And Megan Webster is an international poet, educator, writer. And Megan Webster very recently passed away, and we miss Catherine, we miss Megan. There's also Kelly Parrish, who's an internationally known minister now, as well as she's a poet, and Olga Gutierrez Garcia, who is an international poet and educator. She just had several books out that have continued to sell out. She performs live here, and also she performs internationally. And of course, there's myself. So let's take a look at the topics here. The topic, of course, today is poetry, whether beat or live, performance or sonnet, gazelle, etc., etc., etc. Many of you have texted and tweeted, Instagrammed, and even phoned in questions earlier, and I'd like to spend the first part of the show answering your questions. Number one. What is one of the most interesting aspects of poetry? One of the most interesting aspects of poetry for me is the fact that we get to create, we get to express ourselves, we get to use our everyday situations and to talk about how we perceive what's happening. We can also talk about our imaginary worlds, our interior worlds, our places where no one else can go unless we share them. And we share them in verse, we share them in sometimes what seems to be prose. We rhyme, we don't rhyme, we use imagery and symbolism. We get a chance to assemble all sorts of techniques. Question two, and this comes in to us from our phone lines. It says, how does this impact African Americans today during the COVID-19 pandemic? Wow, yeah, there's going to be a lot of poetry written. Trust me on this. Poets are hurting. Poets are celebrating those who have become well. We are mourning losses, deep, deep losses. And as part of the global community of artists in general, yeah, you'll see a lot of now during the epidemic poetry that will continue to emerge. What, in your opinion, or based on your research, is one possible future impact on the Black community after the pandemic is over? Well, I'm glad you asked that because, of course, you all know I did and have done research and looking at the breakbeat poets and ways in which they discussed what was happening during a period of time when hip-hop was taking over, quote unquote, the consciousness of America. And who are the breakbeat poets? Who's this anthology comprised of? Let's look at Chance the Rapper and what he says about the breakbeat poets. A cool and diversified version of a mixtape, The Breakbeat Poets is a thorough and complete summation of golden era writers who continue to build the scene of literary and performance poetry. And of course, let's quote Jeff Chang. Jeff Chang, who's author of Who We Be, The Colorization of America, and Can't Stop, Won't Stop, A History of the Hip-Hop Generation. We also know that he's hosted many podcasts and many panel discussions on hip-hop. The breakbeat poet represents the struggle-born whispers, joyous shouts, and hopeful flows of a beautiful multitude for decades in the making. Here are the voices of a movement that just won't stop. For the urgent midnight roar of the people's poetry and the glimpses of freshly conjured dawns awaiting their own breaks. This book is nothing short of essential. So this collection of poets, New American Poetry in the Age of Hip-Hop, assembled by Kevin Koval and Quresh Ali Lassana and Nate Marshall, the editors. This is an assemblage of poets who talk about everything from mascots and everything you wanted to know about hip-hop, but were afraid to be hipped for fear of being hopped, and also agate, honorific, or black boy to black boy. Fear, how I knew. Those are just some of the titles, from people like Roger Bonaire Agard in 1968, and Quresh Ali Lassana in 1964, Thomas Sayers Ellis 1963. So we're talking about a lot of the poets who were there in 1974, Tara Betts, and in 1974, Paulo Javier. So these are that collection all the way up through and a couple of generations when we start looking at 1997, 1998, 99. We have a lot more coming, people. A lot more coming. And let's top the quote off from my favorite cultural critic, Mark Anthony Neal, co-editor of That's the Joint, the Hip Hop Studies Reader. Every generation needs its poets. We never doubted that the rappers were poets. But as the breakbeat poets show, the rappers didn't put the poets out of work, because there are lyricist poets, and there are poets who do performance poetry, who rhyme, who don't rhyme, who tell their truth, their story. And as COVID continues, that story will be told after the impact, of course, of COVID. There will be those who will remember and those who will document our future ongoing process as people in this world that has been ravaged by a pandemic. Thank you for asking those questions. Well, oh my goodness, that's all we have time for in this particular segment. This is Miss D, and we're going to take a short break for now. Come right on back. Be strong, stay up, keep the faith.